There was a knock at the door. The fear came over George. Whenever he was high, the least little detail wrong in his world would bring the fear. Irresistible, uncontrollable. He held his breath, not to contain the smoke in his lungs, but because terror had paralyzed the muscles in his chest. He dropped the little notebook in which he wrote his thoughts daily and clutched at his penis, a habitual gesture in moments of panic. The hand holding the roach drifted automatically over the hollowed out copy of Sinclair Lewis's It Can't Happen Here, which lay beside him on the bed, and he dropped the half-inch twist of paper and marijuana on top of the plastic baggie full of green grains. Instantly, a brown, smoldering, dime-sized hole opened up on the bag, and the pot near the coal started to smoke. Stupid, said George, as his thumb stabbed the smoking coal to crush it, and he drew back his lips in a grimace of pain. A short, fat man walked into the room, law officer written in every mean line of his crafty little face. George shrank back and started to close. It can't happen here. Like lightning, 3 stiff, concrete, hard fingers drove into his forearm. He screamed, and the book jumped out of his hand, spilling pot all over the bedspread. Don't touch that, said the fat man. An officer will be in to gather it up for evidence. I went easy with that karate punch. Otherwise, you'd be nursing a compound fracture of the left arm in Mad Dog County Jail tonight, and no right-thinking doctor likely to have a mind to come out and treat you. You got a warrant? George tried to sound defiant. Oh, you think you have cojones? The fat man's breath stank of bourbon and cheap cigars. Rabbit cojones. I have terrified you unto death, boy, and you know it, and I know it, yet you find in your heart to speak of warrants. Next, you'll want to see the American Civil Liberties Union. He pulled aside the jacket of an iridescent gray summer suit that might have been new when Heartbreak Hotel was the top of the hit parade. A silver 5-pointed star decorated his pink shirt pocket, and a .45 automatic stuck in his pants top dented the fat of his belly. That is all the law I need when dealing with your type in Mad Dog. Walk careful with me, son, or you won't have nothing to grab onto next time one of us pigs, as you choose to call us in your little articles, busts in on you, which is likely to happen in the next 40 years while you rot and grow old in our state prison. He seemed immensely pleased with his own oratorical style, like one of Faulkner's characters. George thought, it is forbidden to dream again. We maim our joys or hide them. Horses are made of chromium steel, and little fat men shall ride them. He said, you can't hit me with 40 years for possession, and grass is legal in most other states. This law is archaic and absurd. Shit and onions, boy, you got too much of the killer weed there to call it mere possession. I call it possession with intent to sell, and the laws of the state are stern, and that they are just, and they are our laws. We know what that weed can do. We remember the Alamo and Santa Anna's troops losing all fear because they were high on Rosa Maria, as they called it in those days. Get on your feet, and don't ask to talk to a lawyer, neither. Can I ask who you are? I am Sheriff Jim Cartwright, nemesis of all evil in Mad Dog County. And I'm Tiny Tim, said George, immediately saying to himself, shut the fuck up, you're too goddamn high. And he went right on and said, maybe your side would have won if Davy Crockett and Jim Bowie got stoned, too. And by the way, Sheriff, how did you know you could catch me with pot? Usually an underground journalist would make it a point to be clean when he comes into this godforsaken part of the country. It wasn't telepathy that told you I'd pot on me. Sheriff Cartwright slapped his thigh. Oh, but it was. It was telepathy. Now just what made you think it wasn't telepathy brung me here. He laughed, seized George's arm in a grip of iron, and pushed him toward the hotel room door. George felt a bottomless terror as if the pit of the hell were opening beneath his feet, and Sheriff Jim Cartwright were about to pitchfork him into the bubbling sulfur. And I must admit that was more or less the case. There are periods of history when the visions of madmen and dope fiends are a better guide to reality than the common sense interpretation of data available to the so-called normal mind. This is one such period, if you haven't noticed already. Keep on hanging out with these wild boys from Posaic, and you'll end up in jail, George's mother said. You mark my words, George. And another time, at Columbia, after a very late meeting, Mark Rudd said somberly, a lot of us are going to spend some time in the man's jails before the shitstorm is over. And George's, together with the others, nodded glumly, but bravely. The marijuana he had been smoking was raised in Cuernavaca by a farmer named Arturo Jesus Maria Ibarra y Mendez, who had sold it in bulk to a young Yankee named Jim Riley, the son of a Dayton, Ohio police officer, who in turn smuggled it through Mad Dog after paying a suitable bribe to Sheriff Jim Cartwright. After that, it was resold to a Times Square dealer called Rosetta, the Stoned, and a Miss Walsh from Confrontation's research department bought 10 ounces from her, later reselling 5 ounces to George, who then carried it back to Mad Dog without any suspicion that he was virtually completing a cycle. The original seed was part of that strain recommended by General George Washington in the famous letter to Sir John Sinclair, in which he writes, I find that, for all purposes, the Indian hemp is in every way superior to the New Zealand variety previously cultivated here. In New York, Rebecca Goodman, deciding that Saul will not be home tonight, slips out of bed, dons a robe, and begins to browse through her library. Finally, she selects a book on Babylonian mythology and begins to read. Before all of the gods was Mumu, the spirit of pure chaos. In Chicago, Simon and Mary Lou Cervix sit naked on her bed, legs entwined in a yab-yum lotus position. No, Simon is saying, you don't move, baby. You wait for it to move you. Clark Kent and his Supermen swing into a reprise. We're going to rock around the clock tonight. We're going to rock till broad daylight. George's cellmate in Mad Dog County Jail had a skull-like face with large, protruding front teeth. He was about 6.5 feet tall and lay curled up on his cell bunk like a coiled python. Have you asked for treatment? George asked him. Treatment for what? Well, if you think you're an assassin. I don't think, baby brother. I've killed 4 white men and 2 black men. 1 in California, the rest down here. Got paid for every one of them. Is that what you're in for? My God, they don't stick murderers in the same cell with potheads, do they? I'm in for vagrancy, said the man scornfully. Actually, I'm just here for safekeeping. Till they give me my orders. Then it's goodbye to whoever. President, civil rights leader, enemy of the people. Someday I'll be famous. I'm going to write a book about myself someday. Ace, of course. I'm no good at writing. Look, maybe we can do a deal. I'll have Sheriff Jim bring you some writing paper if you'll write about my life. They're going to keep you here forever, you know. I'll come and visit you between assassinations, and you'll write the book, and Sheriff Jim will keep it safe till I retire. Then you have the book published, and you'll make a lot of money and be real comfortable in jail. Or maybe you could even hire a lawyer to get you out. Well, where will you be? Said George. He was still scared, but he was feeling sleepy too, and he was deciding that this was all bullshit, which had a calming effect on his nerves. But he'd better not go to sleep in the cell while this guy was awake. He didn't really believe this assassin talk, but it was safe to assume that anybody he met in prison was homosexual. As if reading his mind, his cellmate said, "How'd you like to let a famous assassin shove it up to you? How would that be, huh, Ace?" "Please," said George. "That's not my bag, you know. I really couldn't do it." "Shit, piss, and corruption," said the assassin. He suddenly uncoiled and slid off the bunk. "I've been wasting my time with you. Now bend the hell over and drop your pants. You're getting it, and there ain't no further way about it." He stepped toward George, fists clenched. "Guard! Guard!" George yelled. He grabbed a cell door in both hands and began rattling it frantically. The man caught George a cuff across the face. Another blow to the jaw knocked George against the wall. "Guard!" he screamed, his head spinning with pot and panic. A man in a blue uniform came through the door at the end of the corridor. He seemed miles away and vastly disinterested, like a god who had grown bored with his creations. "Now what the hell is all this yelling about in here?" he asked, his hand on the butt of his revolver, his voice still miles away. George opened his mouth, but his cellmate spoke first. "This little long-haired communist freak won't drop his pants when I tell him. Ain't you supposed to make sure I'm happy in here?" The voice shifted to a whine. "Make him do what I say." "You've got to protect me," said George. "You've got to get me out of this cell." The God Guard laughed. "Well, now you might say this is a very enlightened prison we have here. You come down from New York and you probably think we're pretty backward. But we ain't. We ain't got no brutality. Now, if I interfered between you and Harry Coyne here, I might have to use force to keep him away from your young ass. I know you people believe all cops ought to be abolished. Well, in this here situation, I hereby abolish myself. Furthermore, I know you people believe in sexual freedom, and I do too. So Harry Coyne gonna have his sexual freedom without any interference or brutality from me." His voice was still distant and disinterested, almost dreamy. "No," said George. The guard drew his pistol. "Now, Sonny, you take down your pants and bend over. You're going to get it up the ass from Harry Coyne here, no two ways about it. And I'm going to watch and see that you let him do it. Right? Otherwise, you get no 40 years. You get killed right now. I put a bullet in you and you say you're resisting arrest. Now make up your mind what it's going to be. I really will kill you if you don't do like he tells you to. I really will. You are totally expendable, and he ain't. He's a very important man, and it's my job to keep him happy. And I'll fuck you either way, dead or alive." The demented Coyne laughed like an evil spirit. "So there's no way you can escape it, Ace." The door at the end of the corridor clanged, and Sheriff Jim Cartwright and two blue uniformed policemen strode down into the cell. "What's going on here?" said the sheriff. I caught this queer punk George Dorn here trying to commit homosexual rape on Harry," said the guard. "Had to draw my pistol to stop him." George shook his head. "You guys are unbelievable. If you're acting out this little game for my benefit, you can quit now, because you're certainly not fooling each other, and you're not fooling me." "Dorn," said the sheriff, "you've been attempting unnatural acts in my jail. Acts forbidden by the Holy Bible and the laws of this state. I don't like that. I don't like it one little bit. Come on out here. I want to have a little talk with you. We go into the main interrogation room for some speaking together." He unlocked the cell door and motioned George to precede him. He turned to the two policemen who had accompanied him. "Stay behind and take care of that other little matter." The last words were strangely emphasized. George and the sheriff walked through a series of corridors and locked doors until at last they came to a room whose walls were made of embossed sheet tin painted bottle green. The sheriff told George to sit on one chair while he straddled the back of the chair facing him. "You're a bad influence on my prisoners," he said. "I got a good mind to see that some kind of accident happens to you. I don't want to see you corrupting prisoners in my jail, mine or anyone's, for 40 years. "Sheriff," said George, "what do you want from me? You got me on my pot charge. What more do you want? Why do you stick me in that cell with that guy? What's all this scare stuff and threats and questioning for? I want to know some things, said the sheriff. I want to find out everything you can tell me about certain matters. So from this moment, be prepared to tell me only the truth. If you do, maybe things will go easier on you after. Yes, Sheriff, said George. Cartwright squinted at him. He really does look like a pig, thought George. Most do. Why do so many of them get so fat and have such little eyes? Well then, said the sheriff, what was your purpose in coming down here from New York? I'm simply on an assignment from Confrontation, the magazine. I know it. It is a smutty magazine and a communist magazine. I have read it. You're using loaded words. It's a left-wing libertarian magazine, to be exact. My pistol is loaded too, boy, so talk straight. All right, tell me what you came down here to write about. Sure. You ought to be as interested in this as I am, if you're really interested in law and order. There have been rumors circulating throughout the country for more than a decade now that all the major political assassinations in America, Malcolm X, the Kennedy brothers, Medgar Evers, King, Nixon, maybe even George Lincoln Rockwell, are the work of a single conspiratorial, violence-oriented right-wing organization, and that this organization has its base right here in Mad Dog. I came down to see what I could find out about this group. That's what I figured, said the sheriff. You poor, sad little turd. You come down here with your long hair and you expect to get, as you put it, a line on a right-wing organization. Why? It's lucky for you if you didn't meet any of our real right-wingers, like God's Lightning, for instance. The ones around here would have tortured you to death by this time, boy. You really are dumb. Okay? I'm not going to waste any more of my time with you. Come on. I'll take you back to your cell. You might as well get used to looking at the moon through bars. They walked back the same way they'd come. At the entrance of the corridor, where George's cell was, the sheriff opened the door and yelled, "Come and get him, Charlie." George's guard, his face pale and his mouth set in a lipless line, took George by the arm. The corridor door clanged shut behind the sheriff. Charlie took George to his cell and pushed him in wordlessly. But at least he was three-dimensional now, and less like a marijuana phantom. Harry Coyne wasn't there. The cell was empty. George became aware of a shadow in the corner of his vision. Something in the cell next to him. He turned. His heart stopped. There was a man hanging from a pipe on the ceiling. George went over and stared through the bars. The body was slain slightly. It was attached to the pipe by a leather belt which was buckled around the neck. The face, with the staring eyes, was that of Harry Coyne. George's glance went lower. Something was coming out of Harry Coyne's midsection, and there was dangling down to the floor. It wasn't suicide. They had disemboweled Harry Coyne, and someone had thoughtfully moved a shit can under him for his bloody intestines to dangle into. George screamed. There was no one around to answer him. The guard had vanished like Hermes. But in Cherry Knowles Mental Hospital in Sunderland, England, where it was already 11, the following morning, a schizophrenic patient who hadn't spoken in 10 years abruptly began exhorting a ward attendant. They're all coming back. Hitler, Goering, Stryker, the whole lot of them. Behind them, the powers and persons from whom others spirits who control them. But Simon Moon in Chicago still calmly and placidly retains the lotus position and instructs Mary Lou sitting in his lap. Just hold it. Hold it with your vaginal wall like you hold it with your hand, gently, and feel its warmth. But don't think about orgasm. Don't think about the future. Not even a minute ahead. Think about the now. The only now. The only now. The only now that we'll ever have. Just my penis in your vagina. Now, in the simple pleasure of it, not a great pleasure to work toward. My back hurts, Mary Lou said. We're going to rock around the clock tonight. There are Swedish and Norwegian kids, Danes, Italians, and French kids, Greeks, even Americans. George and Hagberg moved through the crowd trying to estimate its number. 200,000, 300,000, 500,000. Peace symbols dangling about every neck, nudes with every body paint. Nudes without body paint, long and dangling hair on boys and girls alike, and over all of it the hypnotic and unending beat. Woodstock Europa, Hagbard said dryly. The last and final Wahrheitsnacht and Adam Weishaupt's erudition finally realized. We're going to rock till broad daylight. It's a League of Nations, George says. A young people's League of Nations. Hagbard isn't listening. Up there, he points. To the northwest is the Rhine, where D. Lorelei was supposed to sit and sing her deadly songs. There will be deadlier music on the Danube tonight. We're going to rock around the clock tonight. But that was still 7 days in the future, and now George lies unconscious in Mad Dog County Jail. And it began, that phase of the operation, as Hagbard called it, over 30 years before, when a Swiss chemist named Hoffman climbed on his bicycle and pedaled down a country road into new dimensions. Will they all come back, George asked. All of them, Hagbard answered tightly, when the beat reaches a proper intensity. Unless we can stop it. Now I'm getting it, Mary Lou cried. It's not what I expected. It's different from sex, and better. Simon smiled benignly. It is sex, baby, he said. What you've had before wasn't sex. Now we can start moving, but slowly. The gentle way. The way of Tao. They're all coming back. They never died. The lunatic raved at the startled attendant. You wait, Governor. You just wait. You'll see it. The amplifier squealed suddenly. There was too much feedback, and the sound went off into a pitch beyond endurance. George winced and saw others hold their ears. Rock around the clock. The key missed in the lock, turned and cut Muldoon's hand. Nerves, he said to Saul. I always feel like a burglar when I do this. Saul grunted. Forget burglary, he said. We might be hanged for treason before this is over, if we don't become national heroes. A fan-fucking-tastic case, Muldoon grinned. He tried another way. They were in an old brownstone on Riverside Drive, trying to break into the apartment of Joseph Malik. And they were not merely looking for evidence. Both tacitly admitted they were hiding from the FBI. The call had come from headquarters just as they were finishing the questioning of Associate Editor Peter Jackson. Muldoon had gone out to his car to take it while Saul finished getting a full physical description of both Malik and George Dorn. Jackson had just left and Saul was picking up the fifth memo when Muldoon returned, looking as if his doctor had just told him his Wasserman was positive. 2 special agents in the FBI are coming over to help us, he said woodenly. Still ready to play a hunch? Saul asked calmly, pushing all the memos back in the metal box. Muldoon merely called Price Fixer back into the cafeteria and told him, 2 feds will be here in a few minutes. Tell them we went back to headquarters. Answer any question they have, but don't tell them about this box. Price Fixer looked at the 2 older officers carefully and then said to Muldoon, You're the boss. He's either awfully dumb and trusting, Saul had thought, or he's so damn smart he's going to be dangerous someday. Now, he asked Muldoon nervously, is it the last key? No, I've got 5 more beauties here and one of them will. Here it is. The door opened smoothly. Saul's hand drifted toward his revolver as he stepped into the apartment and felt for a light switch. Nobody was revealed when the light came on, and Saul relaxed. You look around for the dogs, he said. I want to sit down and go over the rest of these memos. The room was used for work as well as living and was untidy enough to leave no room for doubt that Malik had been a bachelor. Saul pushed the typewriter back on the writing desk, set down the memo box, and then noticed something odd. The whole wall on this side of the room was covered with pictures of George Washington. Standing to examine them more closely, he saw that each had a label, half of them saying GW and the other AW. Odd, but the whole case had overtones that smelled as fishy as those dead Egyptian mouth breathers. Saul sat down and took a memo from the box. Muldoon came back into the living room and said, "No dogs. Not a goddamn dog anywhere in the whole apartment." "That's interesting," Saul remarked thoughtfully. "You say the landlord had complaints from several other tenants about the dogs." "He said everybody in the building was complaining. The rule is no pets, and he enforced it. People wanted to know why they had to get rid of their kittens when Malik could have a whole pack of dogs up here. They said there must have been 10 or 12 from the noise they made. He sure must love those animals if he took them all with him when he went into hiding," Saul mused. The pole vaulter in his unconscious was jumping again. "Let's look in the kitchen," he suggested mildly. Christ. Barney followed as Saul methodically ransacked the refrigerator and cupboards, finishing up with a careful examination of the garbage. "No dog food," said Saul finally. "I noticed. And no dog dishes either. And no empty dog food tins in the garbage." "What wild notion are you following now?" "I don't know," Saul said thoughtfully. "He doesn't mind the neighbors hearing the dogs. Probably he's the kind of left-wing individualist who likes nothing better than quarreling with his landlord and the other tenants about some issue like the no pets rule. So he wasn't hiding anything until he ducked out. And then he not only took the dogs, but hid all evidence that they had ever been here, even though he must have known that the neighbors would have talked about him. Maybe he was feeding them human flesh," Muldoon suggested ghoulishly. "Lord, I don't know. You look around for anything of interest. I'm going to read those Illuminati memos." Saul returned to the living room and began. Illuminati Project, Memo Number 5, July 26, to J.M. "Sometimes you find things in the damnedest places. The following is from a girls' magazine, The Conspiracy by Sandra Glass, Teen Set, March 1969, pages 34 to 40. Simon proceeded to tell me about the Bavarian Illuminati. The nightmare story begins in 1090 AD in the Middle East when Hassan Isabah founded the Ismailian sect, or Hashishim, so called because of their use of hashish, a deadly drug derived from the hemp plant, which is better known as the killer weed marijuana. The cult terrorized the Muslim world until Genghis Khan Mongols brought law and order to the area. Cornered in their mountain hideaway, the Hashishim dope fiends proved no match for the clean-living Mongol warriors. Their fortresses were destroyed, and their dancing girls shipped to Mongolia for rehabilitation. The heads of the cult fled westward. The Illuminati surfaced next in Bavaria in 1776. Simon told me Adam Weishaupt, a student of the occult, studied his teachings of Hassan Isabah and grew hemp in his backyard. On February 2nd, 1776, Weishaupt achieved illumination. Weishaupt officially founded the ancient illuminated seers of Bavaria on May 1st, 1776. Their slogan was Ewige Blumenkraft. They attracted many illustrious members such as Goethe and Beethoven. Beethoven tacked up an Ewige Blumenkraft poster on the top of the piano on which he composed all 9 of his symphonies. It's a great letter to a teen magazine. This is a reader's comment. The last paragraph of this article is, however, the most interesting of all. Recently, I saw a documentary film on the Democratic Convention of 1968, and I was struck by the scene in which Senator Abraham Ribicoff made a critical remark, provoking the anger of the mayor of Chicago. In the ensuing tumult, it was impossible to hear the mayor's shouted retort, and there had been much speculation about what he actually said. To me, it seemed his lips were forming the words that by this time became frighteningly familiar. Ewiger Blumenkraft. The further I dig, the wilder the whole world looks. When are we going to tell George about it? Signed, Pat. Illuminati Project Memo number 6, dated July 26th. To J.M. The John Birch Society has looked into this subject, and they have a theory of their own. The first source I'd found on this is a pamphlet, CFR, Conspiracy to Rule the World, by Gary Allen, associate editor of the Birchers magazine, American Opinion. Allen's thesis that Cecil Rhodes created a secret society to establish English domination of the world in 1888. This society acts through Oxford University, the Rhodes Scholarships, and, hold your breath, the Council on Foreign Relations, a nonprofit foundation for the study of international affairs headquartered right here on 68th Street in New York. 7 out of 9 of our last secretaries of state were recruited from the CFR, Allen points out, and dozens of other leading politicians as well, including Richard Nixon. It is also implied, but not directly stated, that William Buckley Jr., an old enemy of the Birchers, is another tool of the CFR, and the Morgan and Rothschild banking interests are supposed to be financing the whole thing. How does this tie in with the Illuminati? Mr. Allen merely drops hints, linking Rhodes to John Ruskin and Ruskin to earlier internationalists, and finally stating that the originator on the profane level of this type of secret society was Adam Weishaupt, whom he calls the Monster, who founded the Order of the Illuminati on May 1st, 1776. Signed, Pat. Illuminati Project Memo number 7. Dated July 27, to J.M. This is from a small left-wing newspaper in Chicago, the Rogers Park, Chicago, July 1969, Volume 2, Number 9. Daily link with the Illuminati, no author's name given. No historian knows what happened to Adam Weishaupt after he was exiled from Bavaria in 1785, and entries in Washington's diary after that date frequently refer to the hemp crop at Mount Vernon. The possibility that Adam Weishaupt killed George Washington and took his place, serving as our first president for 2 terms, is now confirmed. The 2 main colors of the American flag are, excluding a small patch of blue in one corner, red and white. These are also the official colors of the Hashishim. The flag and the Illuminati pyramid both have 13 horizontal divisions. 13 is, of course, the traditional code for marijuana, and it is still used in that sense by Hell's Angels, among others. Now, Washington formed the Federalist Party. The other major party in those days, the Democratic Republicans, was formed by Thomas Jefferson, and there are grounds for accepting the testimony of the Reverend Jebediah Morse of Charleston, who had accused Jefferson of being an Illuminati agent. Thus, even at the dawn of our government, both parties were Illuminati fronts. This story later repeats the Teenset report that Mayor Daley used the phrase Ewiger Blumenkraft during his incoherent diatribe against Abe Ribicoff. Signed, Pat. Illuminati Project Memo number 8, dated July 27th, to J.M. More on the Washington Weishaupt theory. In spite of the fact that his face appears on billions of stamps and dollar bills and his portrait hangs in every public building in the country, no one is quite sure what Washington looks like. A Project 20 script, Meet George Washington, will be seen tonight at 7:30 on Channel, fill in by local stations. The program offers contemporary portraits of the first president, some of which do not even seem to be the same man. This is a press release sent out by NBC on April 24th, 1969. Some of the portraits can be found in Encyclopedia Britannica, and the resemblance to portraits of Weishaupt is undeniable. Incidentally, Barber called my attention to this. The letter in Playboy asking about the Illuminati was signed R.S., Kansas City, Missouri. According to the Kansas City newspapers, a Robert Stanton of that city was found dead on March 17, 1969, about a week after the April Playboy appeared on the stands, with his throat torn as if by the talons of some enormous beast. No animal was reported missing from any of the local zoos. Signed, Pat. Saul looked up at the pictures of Washington on the wall. For the first time, he noticed the strange half-smile on the most famous of them all, the one by Gilbert Stuart that appears on $1 bills. As if by the talons of some enormous beast, he quoted to himself, thinking again of Malik's disappearing dogs.